The message lit up my phone, its glow cutting through the darkness of my room. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting as I read the words. Can I come in? I need to talk. It was Dylan, my stepbrother. It was past midnight and the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure how to respond. Why now? I thought. What could he possibly need to talk about at this hour? Before I could reply, I heard the creak of the hallway floorboards outside my door. My heart started to pound, each beat echoing in my ears. I froze, my phone slipping from my hand and landing on the bed with a soft thud. The door knob turned slowly, and I held my breath, my body tensing as the door opened. Dylan stepped inside, his silhouette framed by the faint light from the hallway. He closed the door behind him, plunging the room back into darkness. Can't sleep, he said, his voice low and casual, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. I didn't respond. My throat felt too tight to speak, my mind racing with questions I couldn't articulate. He walked over to my bed and sat down. On the edge, the mattress dipping under his weight. I could feel his presence like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. My hands clenched the sheets, my knuckles turning white. What's wrong? He asked, his tone soft, almost caring. But there was something else in his voice, something that made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him to leave, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was trapped in my own body, paralyzed by a fear I didn't fully understand. He reached out, his hand brushing against my arm, and I flinched. "You've been acting weird lately," he said, his fingers lingering on my skin. "I'm just worried about you." His concern felt wrong, twisted in a way I couldn't explain. I wanted to pull away to push him off the bed, but I couldn't. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but my body refused to listen. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my face, and I felt my stomach churn. "You know you can talk to me, right?" He whispered about anything. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real, and it was happening. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My body achy, my mind still clouded with the events of the night before. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that it had all been a dream. But the weight of it was too real, too heavy to dismiss. I could hear voices downstairs, the familiar hum of my mom and stepdad talking over breakfast. Life was normal for them, unchanged. I envied that. I took a deep breath and forced myself out of bed, my legs trembling as I stood. I needed to get through the day. I needed to pretend everything was fine, at least until I could figure out what to do. When I walked into the kitchen, Dylan was already there, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal in front of him. He looked up and smiled at me, his expression warm and friendly, as if nothing had happened. "Morning," he said, his tone light and casual. "You sleep okay?" I stared at him, my stomach nodding. How could he act like this? How could he pretend everything was normal? I wanted to demand an explanation, to scream at him for what he'd done, but couldn't. Not here, not now. "Yeah," I muttered, grabbing a box of cereal from the cupboard. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pour the milk. I sat down at the table, keeping as much distance between us as possible. He didn't seem to notice, chatting idly about some video game he'd been playing. I couldn't focus on what he was saying. My mind kept replaying the night before over and over like a broken record. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd touched me, the way he'd made me feel so small, so powerless. I wanted to forget, but I couldn't. It was burned into my memory, a scar that wouldn't heal. Later that day, I found myself standing outside Dylan's room, my hand poised to knock. My heart was racing, my palms slick with sweat. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing had happened. I needed answers. I knocked on the door, the sound echoing down the hallway. "Come in," Dylan called from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped into his room, my stomach churning with nerves. He was sitting on his bed, a book in his hands. He looked up at me, his expression calm and unbothered. "What's up?" he asked. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. "About last night?" He frowned slightly, setting his book aside. "What about it?" He asked, his tone innocent, almost confused. My chest tightened. "You know what?" I snapped, my anger flaring. "Don't act like you don't remember." He leaned back against his headboard, his gaze steady. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice calm. Too calm. What exactly do you think happened? I stared at him, my fists clenching on my sides. You came into my room, I said, my voice shaking. You sat on my bed. You! I couldn't finish the sentence. The words stuck in my throat, choking me. He raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. Are you saying I did something wrong? He asked, his tone casual, almost mocking. Because I don't remember that. I felt my anger boiling over, hot and fierce. Don't lie to me, I snapped, my voice rising. You know exactly what you did. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, he said, his tone softening. If you're upset about something, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you had a bad dream or something. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him, but I couldn't. I just stood there, trembling with rage and fear as he sat there, calm, composed, acting like I was the one who was crazy. You're lying, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You know you're lying. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he shrugged. Believe what you want, said. But I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there staring at him, feeling more lost and alone than I ever had before. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't keep this to myself. I couldn't pretend everything was okay. But I was terrified of what would happen if I told the truth. Would my parents believe me? Would they even care? Or would they side with Dylan, the son they'd chosen to bring into our family? I thought about the way Dylan had looked at me, the way he'd touched me, the way he'd made me feel so small and powerless. I thought about the way he'd lied straight to my face without a hint of remorse. I couldn't let him get away with it. I couldn't let him make me feel like I was the one who was crazy. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to tell someone. It needed to tell the truth. But the thought of saying it out loud, of admitting what had happened, made my stomach churn. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking as I typed out a message to my best friend, Emily. I need to talk. Can you come over tomorrow? She replied almost instantly. Of course. Are you okay? I stared at the screen, my eyes filling with tears. No, I typed back. I'm not. I sat on the edge of my bed, the weight of the night pressing down on me like a second skin. My phone buzzed with another message from Emily. I'll be there first thing in the morning. Hang in there. I stared at the words, letting them sink in. But it did little to ease the knot in my stomach. The house was quiet, too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside felt like a scream in the silence. My mind kept replaying the events of the night before. Dylan's unexpected presence in my room, his words, the way he looked at me. It felt like a dream, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But it wasn't a dream. It was real, and I couldn't shake it. I glanced at the clock. 2:34 a.m. Sleep was out of the question. My body was exhausted, but my mind was racing, tearing through every detail, every moment, trying to make sense of it. Why did he do it? What did he want? The questions circled like vultures, picking at the edges of my sanity. Finally, it gave up on sleep. I crept downstairs, careful not to make a sound. The kitchen was dark, the only light coming from the moon streaming out through the window. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands trembling so badly I almost spilled it. The cold water did little to soothe the dryness in my throat or the tightness in my chest. I leaned against the counter, staring out into the backyard. The moonlight cast long shadows across the grass, making the familiar landscape feel foreign, ominous. This is my home, I thought. This is supposed to be safe, but it didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like a trap. The sound of footsteps behind me made my heart leap into my throat. I turned around, my breath catching, expecting to see Dylan. But it was just Mom, her hair messy from sleep, her eyes filled with concern. Sweetheart, what are you doing up? She asked softly, her voice tinged with worry. I couldn't sleep, I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to brush my arm. Is everything okay? You've been so quiet lately. I hesitated, the words stuck in my throat. Tell her, a voice inside me urged. Tell her what happened. But the fear of what it would mean, of how it would change everything, kept me silent. I'm fine, I said instead, forcing a smile. Just a lot on my mind. Mom studied me for a moment, her kind eyes searching mine. I could see the doubt there, the unspoken questions, but she didn't press. If you ever need to talk, I'm here, she said gently. You know that, right? I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. Yeah, I know. She gave my arm a reassuring squeeze before heading back upstairs, leaving me alone in the dark kitchen. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palms. Why didn't I tell her? The guilt gnawed at me, but so did the fear. Fear of what would happen. If I spoke up, fear of the cracks it would create in our already fragile family. I stayed in the kitchen for what felt like hours, staring out the window until the first rays of sunlight began to creep over the horizon. The night was over, but the weight of it clung to me like a shadow. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Out for the day ahead. Emily would be here soon. I could hold on until then. When I heard the doorbell, I almost jumped out of my skin. I hurried to the door, my heart racing, and opened it to find Emily standing there, her long black hair framing her face, her eyes filled with concern. Hey, she said softly, stepping inside. Are you okay? The simple question broke something inside me. Tears welled up in my eyes, and before I could stop myself, I was crying, my shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Emily wrapped her arms around me, holding me tightly as I sobbed into her shoulder. It's okay, she whispered, her voice soothing. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Just breathe, I clung to her, letting her steady presence anchor me. God, I needed this, I thought. I needed someone to just be here. Finally, I pulled away, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I'm sorry, I muttered, my voice. Don't apologize, Emily said firmly. What's going on? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It's Dylan, I said finally, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. He came into my room last night. He said, did things. I trailed off. The memories flooding back, making my stomach churn. Emily's eyes widened in shock, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened, her hand resting on my arm, her presence a lifeline. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice breaking. I'm scared, I'm angry, I feel violated, and he just acts like nothing happened. Emily's expression hardened, her usual warmth replaced by something fierce. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone, she said firmly. You need to tell someone. Your mom, your stepdad, someone. I know, I whispered. But what if it ruins everything? What if it tears my family apart? It's already torn apart if this is happening, Emily said gently but firmly. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. And he deserves to face the consequences of what he's done. Her words were like a punch to the gut, but they were also a wake-up call. She was right. I couldn't keep this bottled up. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't. I'll think about it, I said finally, though the thought still terrified me. Emily nodded, giving my arm a reassuring squeeze. You're stronger than you think, she said, and I'm here for you no matter what. Her words gave me a glimmer of hope, but the fear was still there, lurking in the corners of my mind. I knew what I had to do. I just didn't know if I had the courage to do it. Later that day, I found myself standing in front of Dylan's door, my heart pounding in my chest. I raised my hand to knock but hesitated, my fist hovering in the air. This is it, heart. This is the moment when everything changes. I knocked, the sound loud in the quiet hallway. A moment later, the door opened, and there he was, looking at me with that same indifferent expression, like nothing had happened. Yeah, he asked casually, leaning against the doorframe. I took a deep breath, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. We need to talk, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Dylan raised an eyebrow, but he didn't argue. He stepped aside, letting me into his room. I stepped inside, my heart racing, and turned to face him. What's this about? He asked, crossing his arms over his chest. You know what it's about, I said, my voice trembling. Last night, what you did, what you said, you can't just pretend like it didn't happen. For a moment, there was silence. Then Dylan running a hand through his hair. Look, I don't know what you're talking about, he said dismissively. You're imagining things. His denial made my blood boil. I'm not imagining it, I snapped, my voice rising. You were in my room. You sat on my bed. You said. I stopped myself, the words catching in my throat. You know what you did, Dylan. Don't lie to me. He stared at me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then finally he looked away, his shoulders slumping. Fine, he muttered. Yeah, I came into your room. Big deal. I didn't do anything wrong. You scared me, I said, my voice shaking. You crossed the line. I don't know why you did it, but it's not okay. Dylan didn't respond. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on the floor, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, might try to explain himself, but he didn't. He just stayed silent, his jaw clenched tightly. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm telling Mom and Stepdad, I said, my voice breaking. I can't keep this a secret anymore. Dylan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. You can't, he said quickly, his voice desperate. They'll kick me out. You'll ruin everything. You already did that, I said, my voice firm despite the tears welling up in my eyes. You made this mess, Dylan, not me. He stared at me, his expression a mixture of fear and anger. But I didn't back down. I couldn't. Not anymore. I turned and walked out of his room, my hands trembling, my heart racing. I knew what I had to do next. I just didn't know if I could handle the fallout. I found Mom in the kitchen, humming softly as she sipped her coffee. She looked up when I walked in, her smile fading when she saw me expression. Sweetheart, what's wrong? She asked, setting her mug down. I took a deep breath, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Mom, there's something I need to tell you, I said, my voice shaking. It's about Dylan. Before I could finish, the doorbell rang, cutting me off. Mom frowned, glancing toward the front door. Who could that be at this hour? She muttered, walking past me to answer it. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment was slipping away, and I wasn't sure if I could bring myself to try again, but I knew I had to. For my own sake, for my own peace of mind, I had to tell the truth, even if it destroyed everything. Mom opened the door, and there stood Emily, her eyes wide with urgency. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said quickly, her gaze flicking to me. But I need to talk to you, both of you, it's important. Mom hesitated, her kind eyes flicking between Emily and me. Of course, Emily, she said, stepping aside to let her in. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to choke on, and I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. Emily wasted no time. I think we need to talk about what happened last night, she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. She looked directly at me, her wavy black hair framing her face, her expressive eyes full of sympathy. I know it's hard, but you can't let this go. You have to tell them. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I could feel Mom's gaze on me, her brow furrowed in concern. What are you talking about, Emily? She asked, her voice soft, but laced with worry. Emily hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. There's something you need to know about Dylan, she said, her words deliberate. About what he did last night. My stomach twisted. I hadn't been ready for this. Hadn't been ready to face the reality of what had happened, let alone to tell my mom and stepdad. But Emily was right. I couldn't keep it bottled up anymore. The words felt like they were lodged in my throat, choking me, but I forced them out. Dylan, I started, my voice trembling. He came into my room last night. He sat on my bed and he just wouldn't leave. He made me feel, I don't know, scared. The room fell silent. Mom's eyes widened, her face pale. For a moment, she just stood there frozen, as if she couldn't process what I just said. Then slowly, she took a step toward me, her hands trembling. What? What do you mean, sweetheart? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt a lump rise in my throat, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I don't know. I choked. Out! I don't know why he did it. He acted like it was nothing, like it was normal. Momshan flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with a mix of shock and horror. Oh my God, she whispered. She reached out to pull me into a hug, but I flinched, stepping back. I wasn't ready for comfort. Not yet. The memory of Dylan's presence in my room was still too fresh, too raw. I tried to confront him this morning, I continued, my voice shaking, but he denied it. He acted like nothing happened. He made me feel like I was crazy. Emily stepped closer to me, her presence steadying. You're not crazy, she said firmly. He's gaslighting you. He's trying to make you doubt yourself. Mom's face twisted with anger, her hands clenching into fists. Where is he? She demanded, her voice sharp. Where's Dylan? He's downstairs, I said quietly. He's been acting like everything's fine, like nothing happened. Without another word, Mom turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I could hear her calling out for my stepdad, her voice trembling with fury. Emily reached out and squeezed my hand, her touch grounding me. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "This isn't your fault. He's the one who crossed the line." I nodded, tears spilling down my cheeks. I wanted to believe her, to believe that I wasn't the one who had messed everything up. But the guilt was still there, gnawing at me. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was exaggerating? What if this broke our family apart? Mom's voice echoed from downstairs, sharp and angry. I could hear my stepdad's voice too, calm at first, then rising in confusion. The tension in the house was unbearable, like the air before a storm, heavy and electric. "Come on," Emily said, gently tugging on my hand. "Let's go downstairs. You don't have to face this alone." I hesitated, my feet rooted to the floor. The thought of confronting Dylan again, of seeing the smug look on his face, the way he dismissed me, made my stomach churn. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. I took a deep breath and nodded, letting Emily lead me downstairs. The scene in the living room was chaotic. Mom was pacing back and forth, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face flushed with anger. My stepdad was sitting on the couch, his hands gripping his knees, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. Dylan was standing in the corner, his arms crossed, his face a mask of defiance. "What is going on?" my stepdad asked, his voice strained. "Someone needs to explain this to me." Mom whirled around to face him, her eyes blazing. "Your son," she spat, her voice trembling with anger, "came into our son's room last night and made him feel unsafe. He crossed the line and he needs to take responsibility for it." My stepdad's face palled, his eyes flicking to Dylan. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Dylan rolled his eyes, a smirk playing on his lips. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said casually. "I was just checking on him. I didn't do anything wrong." Mom stepped forward, her finger jabbing in Dylan's direction. "Don't you dare lie to us," she snapped. "You know exactly what you did. You scared him. You invaded his space, and you need to own up to it." Dylan's smirk faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Head glanced at me, his eyes narrowing. "Is that what you told him?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "That has scared you. You're being dramatic." I felt a surge of anger, hot-headed and furious, bubbling up inside me. "I'm not being dramatic," I shot back, my voice shaking with emotion. "You invaded my space. You made me feel, I don't know, violated. And then you acted like it was nothing, like it was okay." Dylan opened his mouth to respond, but my stepdad cut him off. "Enough," he said firmly, standing up from the couch. His usual friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by a stern, unyielding expression. "Dylan, you need to be honest with us. What happened last night?" Dylan hesitated, his eyes darting between us. For a moment, I thought he was going to deny it again, to twist the truth and make me out to be the liar. But then, slowly, his shoulders slumped, and he let out a heavy sigh. "Fine," he muttered. "It went into his room. But I didn't do anything. I was just checking on him." Mom shook her head, her eyes filled with disappointment. "That's not good enough," she said. "You don't get to decide what's okay for someone else. You crossed a boundary and you need to apologize." Dylan's face twisted with anger, his hands clenching into fists. "I'm not apologizing," he spat. "I didn't do anything wrong." My stepdad stepped forward, his voice low and firm. "Dylan, you're not leaving this room until you take responsibility for what you did. You hurt him. You scared him, and you need to make it right." Dylan glared at him, his jaw clenched. "Tight!" For a moment, it looked like he was going to argue, but then slowly his shoulders slumped and he looked away. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. The apology felt hollow, empty, like it didn't mean anything. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't saying it because he had to. Mom stepped forward, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This isn't over," she said firmly. "We're going to talk about this as a family. We're going to figure out how to move forward. But for now, Dylan, you need to give him space. You need to respect his boundaries." Dylan didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the floor. The tension in the room was suffocating, thick and heavy, like the air before a storm. Emily squeezed my hand again, her presence a comforting anchor. You did the right thing, she whispered. This isn't your fault. I nodded, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I wanted to believe her, to believe that I wasn't the one who had messed everything up. But the guilt was still there, gnawing at me. What if this didn't fix anything? What if it only made things worse? My stepdad stepped forward, his expression softening. We're going to get through this, he said gently, as a family, but it's going to take time, and it's going to take honesty. I took a deep breath, my chest tight with emotion. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was long, and the wounds were deep. But I wasn't alone. I had my mom, my stepdad, and Emily by my side. And that was enough for now. Wes stood there in silence, the weight of everything hanging heavy in the air. The storm wasn't over yet, but we were weathering it together, and that was all I could ask for. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through them like a ghost, my mind replaying that night over and over again. Dylan's apology had been forced. His words hollow. I could still hear the edge in his voice. The way he'd said, I'm sorry, like it was a chore. It didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel at all. My mom tried to keep things normal. She'd smile at breakfast, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she'd glance at me when she thought I wasn't looking. My stepdad, too, seemed to be walking on eggshells. He'd make jokes at dinner, his amiable laugh filling the room, but it felt strained, like he was trying too hard to keep the peace. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a maze of unspoken words and lingering unease. Emily was the only one who felt steady. She'd text me throughout the day, her words a lifeline. How are you holding up? Do you want to talk? I'd respond, with short answers, not trusting myself to say more. But she didn't push. She just stayed there, a constant presence in the chaos. And then there was Dylan. I avoided him as much as I could, but it was impossible to completely shut him out. He had passed me in the hallway, his eyes needed mine for a split second before he looked away. Sometimes he'd try to make small talk, his tone casual, like nothing had happened. Hey, did you see the game last night? I just nod, my throat too tight to speak. It was infuriating the way he could act like everything was fine when it so clearly wasn't. By the end of the week, I was exhausted. The nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Why didn't I stop him? Why didn't I say something? The questions haunted me, their answers just out of reach. Sleep was elusive, and when it did come, it was restless, filled with dreams I couldn't remember, but left me feeling drained. One evening after dinner, I found myself standing outside my room, my hand on the doorknob. I hadn't been in there much since that night. The four walls felt suffocating, the air heavy with memories, but I couldn't keep running forever. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room was exactly as I'd left it. My bed was still unmade, the sheets tangled from the last restless night. My desk was cluttered with books and papers, the remnants of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I stepped inside, my chest height, and closed the door behind me. For a moment, I just stood there, my eyes scanning the room. Then, almost without thinking, I started to clean. I stripped the bed, pulling off the sheets and tossing them into the hamper. I picked up the books from my desk, stacking them neatly on the shelf. I wiped down the surfaces, the repetitive motions, calming in a way I hadn't expected. When the room was clean, I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on my knees. The air felt lighter now, the space less oppressive, but the heaviness in my chest remained. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding. At it. I had to face what had happened, even if it hurt. I grabbed my phone and texted Emily, "Can you come over?" Her response was almost immediate. On my way. When she arrived, she didn't say much. She just sat down beside me, her presence comforting in its simplicity. For a long time, we just sat there in silence, the weight of everything hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. I don't know what to do. She turned to me, her dark eyes soft with understanding. You're doing it, she said gently. You're processing. You're taking it one step at a time. That's all you can do. I wanted to believe her, but it felt so overwhelming. It's just I keep thinking about that night, about what he did. And I don't know how to let it go. She reached out, her hand resting on mine. You don't have to let it go, she said. Not yet. Not until you're ready, but you can't let it control you either. You're stronger than that. Her words settled over me like a blanket, warm and comforting. For the first time since that night, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I didn't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe it was enough to just keep moving forward, one step at a time. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, as I was getting ready for school, I heard a knock on my door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Yeah, I called out, my voice trembling. The door opened and Dylan stepped inside. He looked different somehow, his usual confidence replaced by something I couldn't quite place. Can we talk? Hesked, his tone hesitant. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him to leave, to get out and never come back. But something in his eyes stopped me. Reluctantly, I nodded. He stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him. For a moment, he just stood there, his hands shoved into his pockets. Then he took a deep breath. I know I messed up, he said quietly. I know I hurt you and I'm sorry. I stared at him, my chest tight with anger and confusion. You already apologized, I said, my voice cold. It didn't mean anything then. Why should it now? He flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor. Because I mean it this time, he said. I've been thinking about what happened, about what I did. And I can't take it back, but I want to make it right. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe him, to accept this apology and move on. But another part of me, the part that still felt small and scared, couldn't let it go. How? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How do you make something like this right? He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm willing to try. I'll do whatever it takes. I need you to give me a chance. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him that he didn't deserve a chance, that he'd lost it the moment he crossed that line. But something in his voice, something raw and vulnerable, stopped me. I don't know if I can, he said finally. Not yet. He nodded, his expression resigned. I understand, he said, and I'll respect that, but just know that I'm here whenever you're ready. With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, my mind racing. I didn't know what to think, what to feel, but for the first time I felt a flicker of something that wasn't just fear or anger or confusion. It was small, fragile, but it was there, and for now, that was enough. The days after Dylan's second apology felt like walking on a tight rope. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. I avoided him as much as possible, but the house wasn't big enough to escape completely. He'd try to catch my eye at breakfast or linger in the hallway when I passed, but I refused to acknowledge him. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, a raw wound that hadn't even begun to scab over. Mom noticed, of course, she always did. Herkind, expressive eyes would flicker between us at the dinner table, her smile tight as she tried to keep the conversation light. Stepdad, ever the peacekeeper, would fill the silence with anecdotes from work or plans for the weekend. But the undercurrent was there, a tension that hummed beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. One evening, after another strained family meal, I retreated to my room. The walls felt closer than usual, the air thicker. E sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands, trying to quiet the storm in my head. That's when I heard the knock, soft, hesitant, but unmistakable. My stomach dropped. Yeah. I called, my voice tighter than I intended. The door creaked open, and there he was. Dylan. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. Heist's expression was unreadable, but there was something in his posture, a fragility I hadn't seen before. Can we talk? Hesked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. My chest tightened, and I could feel my pulse in my ears. Why does he keep doing this? Why can't he just leave me alone? But another part of me, the part that had felt that flicker of something the last time we spoke, hesitated. Fine, I said finally, crossing my arms. But make it quick. He nodded, taking a few steps closer before stopping, as if afraid to cross some invisible line. I know you don't want to hear from me, he began, his voice trembling slightly. And I get it. I don't even know if I deserve to be here asking for this. But I need you to know that I'm trying. I'm really trying. I stared at him, my jaw clenched. Trying? What does that even mean? You keep saying that, I said, my voice low. But what does it actually look like, Dylan? Because from where I'm standing, it just feels like you're waiting for me to pretend everything's okay. He flinched, his eyes dropping to the floor. I'm not, he said quietly. I know I can't just fix this. I know I messed up and I don't expect you to forgive me. I want to understand. I want to know what I can do to make it better. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile at the same time. I wanted to lash out, to tell him that there was no way to make it better, that he couldn't just undo what he'd done. But something in his tone, something that felt almost like desperation, stopped me. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I don't know what you can do. I don't even know what I need. He nodded, his shoulders slumping. Okay, he said, softly. That's fair. And if you don't have an answer, that's okay too. I needed to ask. There was a long pause, the silence stretching thin between us. I could feel the weight of everything we weren't saying, the unsaid words pressing against my chest. Can I ask you something? I said finally, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. Of course. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Why did you do it that night? Why did you come into my room? His expression changed instantly, a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. I don't know, he said quietly. I wish I had a better answer, but I don't. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't myself. And I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I wanted to scream, to demand a better answer, a reason, anything that would help me make sense of it. But it was nothing, just a hollow apology and a blank space where an explanation should have been. That's not good enough, I said, my voice breaking. It's not enough, Dylan. I know, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And I hate myself for it every day. I hate that I hurt you, that I scared you. I hate that I can't take it back. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to hate him too, to hold on to the anger and fear and confusion that had been my constant companions for weeks. But looking at him now, his face raw and vulnerable, I felt something shift. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. A crack in the wall I'd built around myself. Wes stayed like that for what felt like forever. The silence heavy, but not entirely suffocating. Finally, he took a step back, his eyes dropping to the floor. I'll go, he said quietly. But if you ever want to talk or if you need anything, I'm here. I didn't respond, and he didn't wait for me to. He turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. I sat there for a long time staring at the space where he'd been, my mind racing. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel paralyzed. I felt something, and I didn't know what to do with it.